My family in the peaceful suburbs. When I look back at my childhood, it always starts with the golden Kansas sun streaming in through our kitchen window. Our house sat on the edge of a quiet suburb just outside of Wichita, surrounded by wide green lawns and rows of maple trees that exploded in fiery colors every fall. My dad, John Miller, ran a small hardware store on Main Street, and he was the kind of man everyone in town seemed to know. A steady, gentle soul who never let the store close on a neighbor in need. Mornings in our house followed a kind of gentle ritual. Dad would have the radio playing old country hits while he made pancakes, whistling out of tune. I would sit at the kitchen table with a mug of cocoa, watching him flip pancakes and sneak me extra chocolate chips when he thought no one was looking. My mom's laughter used to fill the house, blending with those cheerful tunes. She loved gardening and wore floppy hats, her hands always smelling of roses and fresh earth. I can still picture her reading to me under the big elm tree in our backyard. Her voice, patient and warm. Everything changed when cancer took Mom away. I was 8, and our house suddenly felt twice as large, every corner echoing with memories I wasn't sure how to hold on to. Dad tried his best, balancing work and raising me with a quiet strength. He learned how to braid my hair, badly, and he never missed a single school play or softball game. Over time, it was just the two of us. Summer evenings were spent chasing after our old golden retriever, Max, or lying on the driveway, stargazing and talking about all the places I'd travel someday. Dad made sure I always felt loved and safe, no matter how small or simple our life seemed compared to others. That peaceful world stayed ours until the year I turned 15. The year Dad introduced Linda into our lives. At the start, I welcomed the idea of someone else joining our little family, thinking maybe it was time for new laughter to fill the empty rooms. But nothing could have prepared me for how quickly the gentle rhythm of our home would be disrupted, and how the security I'd always taken for granted could suddenly feel so fragile. A strange look in her eyes. At first, having Linda in our home felt like trying on a new pair of shoes. Unfamiliar, a little stiff, but not necessarily uncomfortable. She moved in with her suitcases lined up neatly by the door and her perfume lingering in every hallway. Dad was happier, trying to make things work, and for his sake, I tried too, but it didn't take long for things to change.
The sheer volume of items presented an
Linda
immediate
had a way
and daunting
of turning
challenge.
warmth into something brittle. Around Dad, she could be all smiles
And as I
and
turned the
soft
pages,
words,
I started to
offering to
notice
make
some
dinner,
anomalies.
laughing politely at his jokes, pretending to listen when he spoke about his day at the shop.
Father.
But as soon as Dad stepped out for work or
We
ran
wish you the
errands,
best of luck with the store.
the whole
Thank
atmosphere
you. We
in
will
the
do our
house
best.
shifted. It was subtle at first, a tightness in her voice when she reminded me to clean up after myself, the way her eyes lingered on the family photos still hanging in the hallway, or how she seemed to bristle whenever I mentioned Mom. What unsettled me most was her gaze. When no one else was around, Linda looked at me differently.
Just trying to give
her
you a
eyes
smile.
cold and assessing, as if she was keeping a mental score. Sometimes
The
I'd
ancient
catch her
forest
standing in the living
whispered
room,
secrets
just
only the
staring
oldest
out the
trees
window,
remembered.
lost in thought. Other times, I'd look up from my homework and find her watching me, expressionless, almost as if she had forgotten I was there. It was in those quiet moments that something inside me tightened, warning me to stay on guard. Little things started to change. My routine, once predictable and comforting, was now punctuated by Linda's sudden, sharp instructions. Wash the dishes this way. Keep your door closed. Don't touch that vase. She rearranged the house, packed away anything of Mom's that still lingered. The faded quilt on my bed, a chipped teacup on the window ledge, even the battered gardening hat resting on the coat rack. When I asked about it, she would smile thinly and tell me it was time to make new memories. But I didn't let myself forget. After a while, I began keeping a journal.
Here, take this.
Scribbling
Thank
down
you.
every odd encounter or uneasy feeling. It was the only place I could let my guard down. Record each incident. Linda's clipped words, the way she triple-checked doors and drawers, her habit of locking the office whenever Dad was away. My suspicion grew day by day, even as I tried to convince myself that maybe I was just being sensitive or struggling with change. Deep down, though, I knew something was wrong. The house I'd grown up in, once warm and filled with sunlight, felt colder and more unfamiliar by the week. And Linda's strange, calculating glances only confirmed what I was beginning to fear. I was no longer safe in my own home, and the person standing across the kitchen from me was not the family I hoped she would be. The shadow after Dad was gone. The day my father died, I learned that grief isn't loud or showy. It's quiet. It settles into the crevices of your life, a constant chill in the air, a stillness in the kitchen where his laughter used to ring. That morning in December, the frost on the window pane seemed thicker, the sunrise colder. I remember the paramedics' faces, blank, practiced, apologetic. I remember Linda's high-pitched voice on the phone, recounting things to relatives as if reading off a script. Most of all, I remember the silence after everyone left, a silence that seemed to swallow the entire house. The funeral was a blur of black coats and whispered condolences. I could barely register the touch of hands on my shoulders, the quick, perfunctory hugs. Linda stood at the front, dabbing her eyes with a white silk handkerchief, the very picture of the grieving widow. But what I noticed, because I had learned to read her, was the way her jaw tightened every time someone mentioned my father's kindness or how much he loved his family. She hated not being the center of attention, even there. When everyone was gone, Linda wasted no time. Overnight, she seemed to slip into a new role. Less of a stepmother, more of a manager. The flowery sympathy cards were swept up and shoved in a box. Lawyers' numbers and insurance papers were laid out across the dining table. She moved with determination and an icy purpose, handling bank statements and account numbers with a speed that left me breathless. At first, I tried to be helpful. I brought her coffee, asked if I could sit with her, tried to offer memories of Dad to fill the gaping holes in conversation. She politely thanked me, then asked me to go to my room under the guise of getting some rest. Behind the closed door, I listened to her footsteps on the hardwood floors, sharp, unfaltering. I felt the house shrinking, closing in on me. Days passed, and the rules quietly changed. I was no longer consulted about decisions concerning the house or Dad's business. Strangers came and went. Lawyers, a jittery real estate agent, a notary who showed up with a handful of documents. Each time, Linda would send me out for groceries or tell me to take a walk around the block. I began keeping careful track of what happened when I was gone. My bedroom felt less like a sanctuary and more like exile. Money, something Dad and I never really discussed, suddenly became the central topic of conversation. I overheard whispered phone calls late at night.
Oh, God.
Linda's voice
God.
tense, always circling the same topics. Accounts, titles, access, signatures. At breakfast, she began asking questions about whether my school had any scholarships, and if I wouldn't be happier being independent sooner rather than later. The implication was always clear. I started searching for Dad everywhere, in the scent of his aftershave that lingered in the bathroom, in the old work boots still tucked in the hall closet, in a half-finished crossword puzzle next to his recliner. It was as if I could stave off the changes just by remembering him, just by holding on a little longer. But Linda was relentless. She informed me, without fanfare, on a dreary Wednesday morning, that she was now executor of Dad's will, and there were certain adult matters she needed to handle on her own. She laughed when she said it, but her eyes were cold. My right to know anything vanished overnight. Paperwork began to disappear from Dad's office. At first subtle, an insurance file here, a folder of bank statements there. His safe, once quietly tucked into the back of his closet, was suddenly empty when I checked. I remember the panic, the realization that there were things I might never see again. Dad's letters, his old watch, even some family photos. My questions were met with tight smiles or clipped answers. "You need to let the adults deal with this," Linda would say, her tone saccharine. I struggled to grieve. Every memory came with a sting. Dad and I on the porch with mugs of cocoa, shivering and laughing at the sky. Dad, exhausted after work, but always making time for a slow dance in the living room. The way he made Saturday pancakes, humming under his breath. These recollections felt stolen now, like they didn't belong in the house anymore. More paperwork came, legal notices, reminders about insurance, something about a house appraisal. Grandma called one evening, confused and teary. Linda said there are changes to John's will. Is that true, honey? I could only whisper that I didn't know, because I didn't. Then came the day Linda walked into my room, sat primly on the edge of my bed, and informed me that, given the circumstances, it would be best if I started looking for a place of my own. She smiled like it was a favor. I was just 17, legally still a minor.
Yes, we have everything you need.
But she
in aisle
assured
3.
me she'd help with the transition, as long as I didn't make things difficult. No mention of my rights, or what Dad would have wanted. Just that icy smile and a stack of community college brochures. For your future, dear. I found myself wandering the house at night, unable to sleep. Each room felt colder, emptier. I began writing letters to Dad in my journal, telling him about the changes, asking for guidance. Sometimes I'd read old emails from him, desperate for a word, a sign. I didn't cry much. I was too angry, too determined not to let Linda see me break. One night, hungry for comfort, I found myself in the garage. Beneath a pile of dusty tools, I discovered an old box filled with mementos. A faded photo of me on Dad's shoulders, a birthday card he'd forgotten to give me, a tiny metal key with a tag labeled Office. Heart pounding, I slipped the key in my pocket. Maybe Dad had known, just a little, that something wasn't right. I started sneaking into Dad's old office when Linda left for errands. I rifled drawers, checked the deep corners of the filing cabinet, searched for anything that might tell me what was happening.
And in the silence
It
of
was
nature's
in those
embrace,
quiet
the world
moments,
finds its
the house
tranquil
sunlit
rhythm,
but
a
eerily
gentle
still,
reminder of life's
that I
eternal
truly
flow.
understood what loneliness meant. The shadow of Linda's presence loomed in every hallway, every phone call, every cold glance across the dinner table. The house, once a cradle of warmth and laughter, had turned into a chessboard, and I realized, for the first time, that I had to start paying attention to the moves. As winter turned to spring,
See you
I knew
later.
I couldn't trust Linda. I couldn't even trust what I remembered. Was the house really so warm before? Or was that just what I wanted to believe? What I did know was this: if I wanted the truth, I'd have to find it myself. So I began keeping meticulous notes. Every strange conversation, every missing document, every time Linda locked a drawer or made a cryptic phone call, it all went in my journal. The more I recorded, the clearer the pattern became. Linda was not just grieving. She was orchestrating something bigger, something meant to leave me with nothing.
Oh,
In the stillness
it
after
won't come
Dad was
out.
gone, I learned what it means to be truly alone and what it means to decide, quietly and fiercely, not to let the darkness win. The cruel ultimatum. Spring arrived that year, but instead of hope, it seemed to bring only tension and uncertainty. The house, once filled with sunlight and familiar sound, felt like it belonged to someone else. Even the air seemed colder, edged with something sharp and unwelcoming. Linda moved through the rooms with growing authority, her high heels echoing on the hardwood, her clipped commands replacing the gentle chaos that once defined our home. It was as if my life, piece by piece, was being methodically packed away, just like my mother's old belongings. In the weeks after Dad's funeral, I did my best to be invisible, to keep my head down and avoid any confrontation. But Linda noticed everything. She had made it her mission to reshape the house, as she put it, insisting it needed a new start just as much as we did. My late-night journaling grew frantic, desperate, each entry capturing another moment of quiet humiliation. A family picture suddenly gone from the wall, my favorite books boxed up
How was your day at school,
and left
son?
by my bedroom door.
It was good, Dad.
The casual way she'd knock once and sweep into my room, eyes scanning for things to criticize. But all of those little affronts were nothing compared to what happened one gray morning in April. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched cereal, the radio babbling country tunes in the background. Linda walked in, immaculate as ever, her blonde hair coiled into a perfect knot, a stack of envelopes tucked beneath her arm. "Emily, we need to talk," she announced, her tone falsely sweet, almost cheerful. Alarm bells went off in my head, but I barely had time to respond before she sat down across from me, folding her hands. "You know, you're almost 18. In a few months, you'll be a legal adult," she began, as if we were about to have some friendly chat about the future. I said nothing, just watched the way she smiled without warmth. "I think it's time you start preparing for a little more independence," she continued. "This house feels too big for the two of us. And, well, I have some plans I'd like to set in motion. I've looked at some places you could stay. There's a nice apartment complex near the community college. Just the thing to help you make a fresh start. And I've taken the liberty of gathering some brochures for job programs and courses." She reached into her stack of envelopes and produced a shiny pamphlet, sliding it across the table as if it were a gift. My chest tightened. "But what about Dad's wishes?" He told me. I bit the inside of my cheek, fighting back the tears that wanted to rise, not giving her the satisfaction. I tried to remember the last time a decision in this house had been mine. My life was being decided while I watched, powerless. Linda stood up, abruptly ending the conversation. "I'll give you until the end of the month to get your things in order. The sooner you adjust, the better it will be for both of us." Then she walked out, high heels tapping,
Always remember
phone
the sequence.
already buzzing in
Like
her
this?
hand. The next days blurred together in a haze of disbelief and numbness. Alone in my room, I boxed up my clothes and notebooks. Each item packed was a goodbye to another piece of my childhood. The smell of my dad's aftershave, still lingering in the closet, brought pangs of nostalgia so sharp I thought I might collapse. But Linda was relentless. Every day she reminded me of the deadline, sometimes with veiled threats, sometimes with a false concern that almost sounded sincere. "If you really want to get into college, you have to move on, Emily," she'd say, voice honeyed, but eyes cold. "You don't want to be the kind of girl who holds everyone back, do you?" The pressure was constant, mounting. She changed the locks to the home office, removed my name from bills, replaced shared passwords. Bank statements I'd once glimpsed on the kitchen desk were now hidden away. Some evenings, I'd come home to see white letterhead peeking from her purse. Legal correspondence, I guess, that I had no right to read. Sometimes, late at night, I'd swear I saw her shredding papers in the den. The whir of the machine, muffled but unmistakable. I tried once to confront her as she brushed past me in the hallway. It wasn't acceptance she was after. It was erasure. My grief was an inconvenience, my presence an obstacle. With every passing day, my childhood slipped further away. Even Max, our old golden retriever, seemed to sense the tension. He'd curl up outside my door at night, offering quiet companionship I so desperately needed. One afternoon, desperate for air, I wandered out to the porch. The grass in the front yard was overgrown. The flower beds where Mom once knelt were wild and untended. How quickly a home could become unrecognizable. I sat on the steps, clutching the house key, a useless token, soon to be surrendered, and let my mind unravel. In the evenings, I scoured Dad's office for anything I might have missed. I hid precious mementos, a letter, an old photograph, in the linings of my suitcase. Somehow, clinging to these fragments made me feel less invisible, less erased. I started having nightmares of finding myself locked out in the cold, of Dad calling to me from the window as the house disappeared behind him. Some mornings, I would wake with tears on my face.
We are so sorry for your
and my
loss.
heart pounding. The dream
She was
fading,
such a wonderful
but
person.
not the dread.
You'll get through this.
My friends couldn't quite understand. I tried, once, to tell my best friend Jordan at school, but she only said, "It sucks, Em, but at least you'll be on your own soon, right? Like a college adventure." She didn't see what I was losing. This wasn't about freedom or a new start. It was about being ripped from the only anchor I'd ever had. By the final days of April, Linda's patience vanished altogether. She stood in my doorway, arms folded, her lips pressed thin. "I expect to have your room cleared by Saturday morning," she said. "I have a realtor coming to look at the
the
place.
stars are not just
And I
dots in the
don't want
sky,
any
they are
signs of you.
stories.
Or your father's
So,
clutter
what
when
stories
they
do
arrive."
they tell tonight, Dad?
I nodded, numb. That was it. The end. I packed the last of my things. The journals, the old photographs, the battered softball glove Dad gave me years ago, and carried them out to the car. Max whined, circling my legs. Linda shooed him away, muttering about dog hair. Standing in the driveway for the last time, I looked up at the house, its windows reflecting the pale pink dusk, the porch light flickering against the gathering dark. I felt hollowed out, but in that emptiness, a new resolve took hold. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I promised myself, there, in the fading light, that I would fight to reclaim what was mine and to honor the family that Linda had tried so hard to erase. That was the night I left, but it was also the night I began to plan my return. The plan to unmask. Her moving out of my childhood home felt like being cast into the ocean without a life vest. My new apartment was a shoebox on the top floor of a squat concrete building on the east side of town. The kind of place where every floorboard creaked and the only view was a tangle of telephone wires against the sky. At night, I could hear my neighbors, someone practicing the saxophone badly, someone else yelling into a phone. Sometimes I'd hear my own voice, trembling and uncertain, echoing back at me from the bare walls.
I am not
For the first
negotiating.
time in my life,
This
I understood what it meant
is how it's going
to
to
be
be.
completely, utterly alone. The first week, I barely ate. I was terrified to spend the little money I had, and the silence closed in like a fist. My only comfort was Max,
Hello?
my old golden
Can you hear me?
retriever, who now slept at the foot of my bed on an old blanket. Max was the last piece of my old life I'd managed to keep. We'd take long walks together at sunset, which usually ended with me sitting in the park clutching my notebook, the pages filled with frantic writing. That notebook became my anchor. I chronicled everything: dates, conversations, the change in Linda's tone, the faces of the strangers who'd visited the house after Dad died. Details that might have seemed insignificant at first took on a sinister edge. The way Linda shredded mail at midnight, her obsession with locking the office, the phone calls she always took outside, away from me. Then came the night when, rereading my notes, a pattern emerged. Linda's push to evict me wasn't just cruelty or personal spite. It was deliberate.
I do.
She had tried to erase every trace of me.
Good.
And more importantly, every trace of Dad's intentions. Suddenly, I realized I didn't have to accept being powerless. I could do something about it. That's when my plan began. Step 1. Knowledge is power. I started at the public library, using the battered old computers in the corner to research probate law and inheritance rights in Kansas. I read everything I could find on wills and estate disputes, learning new terms: executor, beneficiary, intestate. The work made me feel like I had a grip on something real, something I could fight for. I discovered that a will could be contested if there was evidence of fraud or undue influence, and that the executor had a duty to disclose all documents to surviving heirs. Was there a way Linda had overridden Dad's wishes? Was a newer will hidden somewhere? The more I read, the angrier I became.
I knew
There were
you were going to
procedures
do
Linda
that.
should have followed. Notifications,
I won.
financial disclosures, keeping records open to beneficiaries. Instead, she'd locked me out, hiding everything behind a facade of legalese and forced politeness. Every evening, I'd return from the library and pore over my notes, growing more resolved with each new detail. If Linda had done something illegal, I would find proof. I just had to be patient and careful. Step 2, tracking down Dad's attorney.
Guilty.
I remembered the name scrawled on a business card that Dad once kept in his office. David Hanover. On a chilly Saturday morning, after a restless night spent rehearsing what I'd say, I called the number I found online. Hanover Law, this is David, came the voice. Gruff, but not unfriendly. My heart
Can we
hammered
get
in my
ice
chest.
cream?
Mr. Hanover, my name is Emily Miller. You were my dad's lawyer. I think something's wrong with my dad's estate. Could we meet, please? I could almost hear the concern in his pause. Then he agreed to meet me at his office the following Monday. That meeting changed everything. Mr. Hanover listened as I described what Linda had done. Her evasiveness, the missing papers, the abrupt eviction. He grew more serious with each detail. Finally, he leaned forward. Emily, your father was
I need to
diligent.
go.
He updated his will after your mother died. And again, after he married Linda. He wanted to care for both of you. The last version I have on file names you as the sole beneficiary. Linda is only the executor, not an heir. Breath caught in my throat. But Linda said she presented a will at the house, one that left everything to her. Mr. Hanover shook his head. That's impossible, unless something has been forged or hidden. Together, we pieced together a strategy. Legally request a full accounting of the estate. Demand to see all versions of the will. And, if Linda refused, file for a formal
How could you
hearing.
do this to me?
Mr.
I never did
Hanover
this right.
agreed to
I never
reach out
wished
to
it
the
happened.
probate court
I never meant for this to
immediately
happen.
to request a stay on any further distribution of assets. Step 3, building the case. I didn't stop there.
The target is
I
currently
contacted
located at the
relatives,
old docks, warehouse
Aunt
number
Carol,
7.
old
Be
friends
careful.
of Dad from the store, even Mr. Matthews, our neighbor who'd always come over to watch football. I asked if they'd seen anything suspicious, if Linda had ever mentioned changing the will, or if anyone had witnessed strange visitors coming by. While no one had seen the documents, several told me they felt something was off. Linda had said things about making a fresh start, and Finally having control, I dug through every scrap of paperwork I'd saved from the house. Tucked inside the lining of an old duffel bag,
What if they missed this angle?
I found the small brass key I'd pocketed from Dad's garage. It was a perfect fit for the top drawer in my father's old work desk, now stored with my belongings. In that drawer, beneath a stack of yellowed receipts and faded letters, was an envelope marked with my name and a date after Dad had married Linda. Inside was a signed, notarized copy of his most recent will, naming me as his sole beneficiary. Tears welled up as I held the paper in my hands. It felt like Dad reaching out across the years, telling me he hadn't forgotten me. Now I had what I needed. Step 4, the quiet resolve. In the days that followed, I learned how to make careful copies, date and photograph every piece of evidence, and how to present my findings to Mr. Hanover so he could file our formal objection in court. My anger became direction, a clean, steady fire. I walked Max through the city, rehearsing my testimony aloud. Every time I grew anxious, I would close my eyes and remember the sound of Dad whistling as he made pancakes, the feel of his arms around me, his voice telling me, "Don't let anyone decide your worth for you, Em." I understood now that what Linda feared most wasn't my presence in the house. It was my voice, my refusal to disappear. For the first time in months, I felt powerful. Step 5, ready for battle. As the court date approached, Linda became more frenzied. She left angry voicemails, alternately pleading and threatening. Suddenly, remembering old debts and expenses that might mean nothing would be left anyway. But I knew now how to read her. Her desperation spilled out in clumsy panic, not cold calculation. With the help of Mr. Hanover, I submitted all the evidence. In my journal, I marked the days until the hearing with bold red X's. I called Aunt Carol and told her the truth.
I need this resolved by morning.
And she promised to come
No
and
excuses.
support me in court. No more secrets, no more hiding. By the time the hearing arrived, I was exhausted but resolute. I stood in front of the courthouse, Max at my side, clutching my notebook in the original will. I wasn't just fighting for a house or some money. I was fighting for my dad's promise, for justice, for memory, for my right to exist. Whatever happened next, I was ready. The day the truth was revealed. The courthouse in Wichita was an old red brick building with marble steps and tall, arched windows. That morning, as I stood beneath its shadow with Max at my side and Aunt Carol clutching my hand, I felt the weight of everything I'd lost.
This final piece of evidence clearly establishes a motive,
just maybe,
providing the definitive closure needed for this case.
Inside, fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow, and the air buzzed with the low murmurs of lawyers, court clerks, and families awaiting justice of their own. My heart hammered in my chest, but my resolve was steely. For months, I'd watched Linda manipulate, erase, and dominate. This time, I came prepared. Linda swept in 10 minutes late, immaculate as always, in a navy suit and heels that clicked with every step. Her face was a mask of uneasy confidence, but I caught the flicker of anxiety when she saw Aunt Carol, and again, when she realized I wasn't alone. She barely looked at me as she took a seat, her lawyer whispering something into her ear. For an instant, she glanced in my direction, her eyes cold and sharp, and I could almost feel her calculating how the morning would play out. The probate judge presiding over our case was a gray-haired woman named Judge Drummond, whose calm, measured presence radiated authority. The courtroom was small and rather plain, but it might as well have been a stadium. Every seat in the gallery was filled.
Oh no.
Neighbors from our street, Dad's oldest friends from the hardware store, even a few of my former teachers. Grandma, shaky but dignified,
Get it done.
sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. When I took my place at the table beside Mr. Hanover, I focused my thoughts on God. The way he always listened, his
Good morning.
unwavering sense of fairness,
I am here
his belief
today
that the truth
to speak
always
my
rose to the
truth.
surface, no matter how deep it was buried. The proceedings began with Linda's lawyer, a brisk man named Mr. Sheldon, reading aloud from what Linda presented as the most recent and valid will. In her version, Linda inherited the house, the store, the accounts, while I was left only with sentimental items. Family photos, a few personal effects. I heard a few shocked gasps ripple through the room, and I glimpsed Aunt Carol's face, flooding with outrage. Judge Drummond turned to Mr. Hanover. Mr. Hanover, do you object to the presented version of the will? He rose. Your Honor, we do. We have substantial evidence to submit, multiple documented inconsistencies, as well as an original, notarized. Will dated 3 months after the one just presented.
You saw everything.
I have copies for the court and opposing counsel.
Yes.
With your permission, my client would like to testify. For a moment, Linda's confident facade faltered. She shifted in her seat, eyes darting to where I stood. Judge Drummond nodded. Proceed, Ms. Miller. I tried to steady my voice in my trembling hands. I held up the original envelope
Today
Dad
we're
had
bringing
left
you
for
an
me,
exclusive report
displaying
on the
the
Maggie
signature,
case.
date, and notary seal. This is my father's last will. He gave
Just
it to
take
his
it.
lawyer
No.
and left a copy in his office for me, just in case. In it, he names me as the sole beneficiary. He wanted to be
Match
sure
found.
both his wife and daughter were provided for. But something changed. After he passed, my stepmother took control. She restricted my access to family records, changed the locks, removed my name from the family accounts, and pressured me to move out while I was still a minor. As I spoke, Aunt Carol and Grandma nodded, their faces grave. I continued, I have journals and emails from my father, as well
can't
as
believe
evidence
this is happening.
that the presented will was typed on a different machine than all of Dad's prior documents. There are missing notary entries, forged signatures, not just on this will, but on financial powers of attorney. Linda erased all traces of me from the house and the estate. She pushed
You know
aside
exactly what you
everyone who
did.
questioned her. Friends, neighbors, even my father's
Tell
mother.
us what happened.
The judge listened with rapt attention, occasionally
We have a right
glancing
to
over
know.
her glasses at Linda, whose rigid posture now betrayed her nervousness. Mr. Hanover walked the court step by step through dates, notarizations, and Kansas inheritance law. He highlighted the discrepancies, mismatched notary stamps, bank documents signed after Dad's death, and Linda's unwillingness to provide a full accounting of the estate. Then came the witnesses. Aunt Carol described the sudden change in Linda's behavior after Dad's funeral, her secrecy.
What do you think we should call
her
our new friend,
insistence
Ethan?
on making all arrangements herself, her constant talk
Can we
of
call it
a fresh
Sparkle?
start. Mr. Matthews,
too late now.
our neighbor, remembered seeing out-of-town notaries visiting the house. Even Grandma, her voice trembling
We have a
but
solid
proud,
case, and the strategy
recalled
is
how
designed to
Linda
protect your
refused
interests
to let her
every
see the
step
will
of the way.
or answer questions about
I can do
Dad's
this.
wishes. For the first time, I watched Linda shrink. Each statement was a chisel against her carefully built defense. Her lawyer objected, feigned ignorance, fumbled for explanations, but Judge Drummond pressed for specifics. Finally, it was Linda's turn to speak. She rose stiffly, hands clasped, trembling ever so slightly. She tried to sound composed as she insisted she had respected my father's memory, cared for him in his final days, and followed his supposed wishes. But when Judge Drummond pressed her on the notary discrepancies and late altered paperwork, her answers became evasive, one contradiction unwinding the next. The moment of truth came when the judge asked, Is there any reason you cannot produce the original copy of the will you claim is valid? Linda slumped back into her chair, as if deflated. For the first time since my father died, she looked defeated. No longer in control, her network of lies unraveling openly at the heart of the community she had thought she could fool. I felt no triumph. Instead, an almost painful sense of relief spread through my chest. I hadn't wanted revenge. I just wanted my father's truth to matter.
The package needs to be moved to the usual coordinates.
As the room
Confirm
dispersed,
delivery by dawn.
people came to embrace me. Aunt Carol, Mr. Matthews, even my old math teacher. Grandma grasped me, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're as brave as your dad,"
The blue strokes hint
she
at
whispered.
departure. A
Max
passage
wagged
through
his
the
tail
western
at my
gate.
feet,
Yes, the setting
restless
sun
to go
confirms
home.
it. Safe passage
As we
after
stepped out
dusk.
of the courthouse into the bright Kansas
God.
sunlight, I let myself finally breathe. Life would never go back to the way it was. But this victory was more than personal. It was a promise fulfilled and a wrong set right. In the months that followed, Linda disappeared from my life. Rebuilding was slow. The house was still there, waiting for me, filled with memories and shadows.
Damn
but
it.
now something brighter, too. A sense that I hadn't only
And then
survived,
what happened next?
but learned to speak for myself. For the first time in a long while, I looked ahead, not with fear, but with the quiet certainty that I could face whatever came next. A new chapter of life. The days following the courtroom, victory passed in a bright, surreal haze. For so long, I had lived under the shadow of loss and suspicion that, once the truth was set free, I scarcely knew how to move forward. The house was now, legally, indisputably mine, but the rooms echoed with the ghosts of the past and the silence of what had been stripped away.
I understand.
I spent my first night back in my childhood bed, Max curled up beside me, both of us a little uncertain how to reclaim the word home. The sun rose the next morning, washing the familiar kitchen in golden light. I stood where Dad used to hum off key and flip pancakes, noticing the dust motes swirling through beams of light. The chipped mug with my faded initials still tucked at the back of the cabinet. Everything was both the same and profoundly changed. I made coffee and watched it steam, breathing in the memory
Data
of
backed up to
simpler
cloud.
days.
Monitoring
Then started
active.
the slow work of putting my life together. That spring was a season of small beginnings. I threw back every curtain and opened each window, letting sunlight and fresh air dispel months of stagnant dread. I spent hours tending to the neglected flower beds, pulling weeds, coaxing new life from old roots, planting seeds for the first time without either of my parents to guide me. Sometimes my hands would ache with the effort, but I found comfort in the soil and the scent of earth. Watching a green shoot break the surface, I felt a flicker of something I'd feared lost, hope. There was
We need
so
to
much
leave
to repair,
now.
not just in the house, but inside myself. Linda had left in a blur of bitterness and denial, avoiding my eyes as she packed her things. When she was finally gone,
Johnson.
I wandered through the rooms, collecting remnants of her presence. A forgotten scarf, a bottle of expensive perfume on the dresser, papers and keys that were now useless to her. I bagged them up and sat on the back porch, listening to the cicadas
This is going to be
and the
more difficult than I
distant
thought.
sound of kids practicing softball at the park, charting out how to begin again. The legal process, though grueling, eventually quieted down. Letters from the court arrived less frequently. My lawyer called only to confirm transfers and sign documents. Each time I signed my name, I felt stronger, more real. I kept my father's
so
last
here's our
will
target.
tucked
This
in
is
a
the
locked
weak
drawer.
link.
Not because I feared its loss any longer, but because it was proof
I've been holding
of
on to
something
this
more
for so
permanent.
long,
My
and it's
own
time I
resilience.
finally said it.
Loneliness returned sometimes, sharp and uninvited. I had lost my mother as a child, and my
How did
father
it come
as a
to
teenager.
this?
And even though their absence had shaped me, I no longer let it control me. I began spending Sunday afternoons visiting Grandma in her small apartment across town. She would make peanut butter cookies and tell stories about Dad. Stories I'd never heard before. Silly memories and quiet confessions. We'd laugh until we cried, sometimes just holding hands in a gentle understanding of shared grief. Sometimes Aunt Carol would join us, bouncing her new grandson on her knee and reminding me that family could grow even after so much loss. I returned to school that summer, determined not to let lost time defeat me. My grades recovered slowly. At first, I was quiet in class, content to fade into the background, guarding my pain like a secret. But as the weeks passed, I found myself answering questions again, raising my hand, rejoining conversations. Jordan apologized for not understanding what I'd gone through. And though some days the old rift still lingered, her friendship became a tether back to the ordinary world. We spent afternoons at the local pool, talking about hopes for college and the kind of futures we once thought were out of reach. Max, aging but loyal as ever, trotted beside me on long evening walks. We followed the old sidewalk to the park, where I'd sometimes catch glimpses of my younger self, running barefoot on the grass, squealing at the first fireflies of summer. I'd sit on the swings and let the cool night air clear my mind, listening to the gentle patter of Max's paws.
All the evidence
These
is stacked
walks
against
became
you.
a meditation, a way to stitch old hurts into new memories.
This can't be happening.
Little by little, I transformed the house into a reflection of who I was becoming. The walls, once bare and stark, now held framed photos from happier times and new artwork found at flea markets. I painted my mother's favorite room a pale yellow, filling it with her rescued gardening books and the battered hat Linda had tried to throw out. I even turned Dad's old office into a reading nook, its shelves lined with legal guides and mystery novels. The house began to warm around me, not erasing the past, but honoring and expanding it. I volunteered at the hardware store on Main Street, where Dad had been known for his kindness and dependability. Mr. Daniels, the new manager, let me sweep floors after school. Sometimes customers would recognize me and tell stories about Dad's generosity, how he'd once fixed a window for free or delivered supplies to an old friend in the middle of a snowstorm. Those stories made me ache with longing, but slowly became a source of pride. I realized I could honor his memory by carrying on his spirit of caring. One evening, found a letter wedged in the back of a desk drawer, addressed to me in Dad's looping script. I unfolded it, hands trembling, and read his words of hope, pride, and encouragement. I cried then, truly and deeply, but after, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like an empty page to fear, but a story I could write myself. The new school year began, and with it, college applications. I filled out forms late at night, Max snoring nearby, often pausing to look around at the room I'd reclaimed. I wrote essays about resilience, about love and loss, about the small victories of choosing to hope.
I need to find it before they do.
There were still days the grief returned, sudden and raw, like stepping barefoot on a jagged stone. But each time, I got up, brushed myself off, and kept moving forward. By Thanksgiving, the house was once again filled with laughter. Aunt Carol brought pie. Grandma told the old stories. Jordan stopped by with a care package from her mom. I looked around the dinner table and understood that while the shape of my family had changed, the warmth remained. I still visited the backyard sometimes, sitting under the elm where Mom used to read to me, and Dad had taught me to stargaze. I'd talk to them softly about my small triumphs, my fears, my plans for the future, And as the wind moved through the leaves, I felt, for the first time, not altogether alone. That autumn, as the trees turned amber and the sky stretched wide, I realized I was ready. Ready for whatever the next chapter might bring. Ready to honor the past without letting it bind me to pain.
I'm so tired of
Ready
this.
to
Then
build a
just
life
leave.
with room for sorrow and for joy, for remembrance and renewal. A new chapter, indeed. And this time, I'd be the one to write it.